Ionic grids are a major component of the framework. If you've worked with grids such as Bootstrap, you'll be familiar with the concepts here. However, the major difference with the Ionic grid, and in my opinion the advantage, is it uses Flexbox. This means we're not restricted to a 12-column grid, for example, as you might be with other frameworks, where you have to state how large each column is. Just specify the number of columns you want, whether that's 3 columns or 23 columns, and Ionic will handle it. Ionic will automatically implement a responsive grid that, by default, gives even widths for all columns, regardless of the number of columns. For example, if you have 4 columns, it will make each column 25%. If you have 10 columns, each column will be 10%. In some cases, you might want to specify the width a little more explicitly. In this case, Ionic allows you to specify a number for explicit column widths, such as 10, 20, 25%, and others. Column offsets are also fully supported. And if that wasn't enough, Flexbox also supports the ability to vertically align columns to the top, center, or bottom. Let's look at a few quick examples to give an idea how grids work. In this example, you can see the first cell is col 50, which means 50% of the width. Then the remaining 2 columns equally fill the remaining width, since there is no explicit size given. Same goes for the second and third rows. In the fourth row, there is no explicit column sizes, so the grid is responsive and the columns equally share the width with 50% each. Here we have a column offset of 33% for the first column in the first row. Then we have a column offset of 33% for the second column in the second row. And finally, a column offset of 67% for the third row. The first column in each row is just to give each row some vertical size. The thing to focus on here is the vertical alignment for the first 3 columns. In the first and third row, the alignment is on top, which is the default. In the fourth row, it's middle, and in the fifth row, it's bottom, with the second row showing all 3 options. Now that we understand a little about the Ionic grid system, let's see how we can now incorporate it into our app. The grid system in Ionic is extremely easy to use and makes it a breeze to align your screens how you want them. Let's use the grid system in a couple of our screens, starting with the team details screen. In this screen, let's take out the display we have here, and I'm just going to have 1 row. And you can see I can add that 1 row just by a div tag with a class of row. And in this 1 row, I'm going to have 3 columns. In the first column, let's just put the game time. And let's have a look at what our app shows now. What we can see is it's not fitting too well. So let's fix that. Let's go back over here. I'm going to put in a snippet. And now when we flip back to the app, it looks a little bit better. I have the date on top and the time on bottom. Now let's go to the second column. And in the second column, the first thing we'll do is let's add an H3 tag. And in this H3 tag, let's give the home away indicator, that's versus or at, and then we'll just give the opponent name. Now what we can see here is it's not fitting too well. And the reason is because we have 3 columns that are all getting equal width. First column here, second column here, and the third column is here. We don't have anything in it quite yet. One thing we can do is we know the first and third columns aren't going to be very wide. So we can say, don't make those equal width. Just make them, in this case, 20%. So I can do that by saying -20 to the first and the third column. Let's save that. And now when we flip back over here, you can see, we can see the text much easier now in the third column. So this is taking 20%. The third column is taking 20%. That's 40% total. That means the remaining column here is taking the remaining 60%. Now let's go put in the third column. For this third column, let's put an H4 with a class of positive. And right here, we're just going to say the score display. So we have the blue font because we said positive in the class. And we can see the score right here. But one problem is that we can see the alignment for the score is really up at the top for each item. It would be better if it was more centered, almost even with that arrow. You could say the same thing for the second column as well. So one way we can fix that is to add a class called callCenter, and we'll do that for the second and the third. And while I'm at it here, I'm going to add another row in here for the game location. Now when we look at our app, we have much better alignment here, and we can see the score is now aligned in the middle. Now this screen is looking pretty good, and the grid system has helped tremendously, giving us these 3 columns. Let's go over to the standing screen and see how the grid system can help us there. So I'll click standings to navigate over there, and we see right now we just have the team name and the record. Over in the standing screen, let's again delete the display that we have there right now. And in this case, I'm going to use 3 rows instead of 1 row. In the first row, I'm just going to have a single column with a p tag in it. And this p tag is just going to display the team name. We can see we just have the team name, nothing too interesting quite yet. Let's go down to the second row. For the second row, I actually want to have 6 columns, and I'm going to have these as the columns headings. So I'll come in here, columns times 6, and we're going to put headings in here. That's just a placeholder for now. So I've added the 6 columns, and the headings are going to be wins, losses, winning percentage, points for, points against, and then the diff is points for minus points against. And if we see that in the app, we've got a pretty nice looking grid here. We have 6 columns. These are just the columns headings. Now we have to put in the actual values. We're going to come in here, and again, we need to have 6 columns. And they're going to have p tags inside each one. And this time we're binding to a property, some kind of property on that team object. So let's fill in these real quick. So we have property. This is going to be the wins property. This is going to be the losses. Winning percentage. Points for. Points against. And finally, points diff. Thanks to Ionic's grid system, things are starting to look pretty good. However, I use p tags for almost everything, so it's a little too uniform. Next, we're going to explore how we can use Ionic's typography to make important text stand out in our apps.